You're banned from Thanksgiving, idiot. You ruin every mood you walk into. She said it like she was talking about the weather. Just like that, with her glass of wine still halfway to her lips. Not even looking at me. My brother chuckled under his breath. The kind of laugh people use when they want to be seen siding with power. The table fell silent for a moment, long enough for me to hear the knife scrape my plate as I set it down. No one spoke. They just waited for me to react, to make a scene so they could call me dramatic again. I didn't. I reached for my purse, stood up, and felt my chair legs drag across the tile. That sound was louder than any words I could have said. My mother, Lorraine, didn't blink. She just muttered, "Good riddance," and started cutting her turkey again. I walked out. The front door clicked shut behind me, and the cold November air hit my face so hard it felt like a slap. I stood there for a moment, staring at the frost on my windshield, wondering how I'd become the villain in my own family. The drive home was quiet, except for the sound of the heater trying to keep up with the snow. I didn't cry. Not then. I just gripped the steering wheel and kept repeating the words in my head, like a prayer I didn't believe in anymore. My name's Maisie Mitchell. I'm 46 years old. I fix other people's numbers for a living. I'm an accountant who can find missing cents in 100 pages of statements. I just never noticed how everyone's been living off mine. Sometimes being the dependable one turns you invisible. You pay the bills, you take the calls, you fix the mistakes, and somewhere along the way, people start mistaking your silence for weakness. Maybe that's why Lorraine said what she did. Maybe she thought I'd always come back like I always do, with groceries and apologies and a check to cover her overdue credit cards. But something in me cracked tonight. Not loud, not visible, just a quiet split deep inside. You know, it's strange. When someone calls you useless long enough, part of you starts to believe it. But when the same person still needs you to survive, that's when you start seeing the truth. I think that's the part that hurts most. Realizing that love in my family has always come with an invoice attached. And if you've ever felt that kind of invisible exhaustion, the kind that doesn't show up on your face but sits behind your eyes, then maybe you'll understand me. Maybe you've been the one holding everyone else together, waiting for someone to notice that you're the only thing keeping the roof from collapsing. If you have, then stay with me, because this story, my story, is for every daughter who gave too much and got silence in return. When I got home, I left the porch light off. I sat in my car for a while, the engine still running, watching my breath fog the glass. The house felt empty in a way that made me nervous to step inside. But I did. I hung my coat, made tea, and stood by the kitchen window, staring out into the falling snow. It looked almost peaceful, like the world was being covered in forgiveness. The quiet didn't last. My phone buzzed on the counter. Unknown number. I ignored it. Then it buzzed again. Same number. I finally picked up. "This is Maisie. Ms. Mitchell, this is Sarah from First County Bank. I'm sorry to bother you this late, but we've got another past due notice on the account ending in 437. It's listed under your name and Lorraine Mitchell." My stomach dropped. That can't be right. I took my name off her accounts 2 years ago. There was a pause on the line. "I understand, but it seems a new utility line was added last week. Electric and gas. Same address, same signature." I leaned against the counter, my tea going cold in my hand. "My signature?" "Yes, ma'am." The words rang in my ears. I felt the old sting of disbelief crawl back up my chest, the kind that comes when you realize someone didn't just hurt you. They planned it. I could picture her perfectly, sitting at that same kitchen table, the one I bought her, signing my name with a steady hand. She'd done it before years ago, when I was too naive to question anything. I thanked the woman, hung up, and stood there for a long time. The clock on the microwave blinked 11:42. I wanted to laugh, but it came out as a shaky breath instead. I'd spent half my life cleaning up after my mother's mistakes. I never thought I'd have to start protecting myself from her. Outside, the snow kept falling, soft and soundless. Inside, I finally let one tear slip, not because I was sad, but because I knew something had ended. Maybe not love, maybe not family, but the version of me they depended on, the one who'd bend until she broke, she was done. I picked up my phone again, looked at the call log and whispered, "Not this time, Mom." Then I turned off the kitchen light and let the darkness settle around me. I used to tell myself it was just helping, paying the property tax on Mom's house, covering my brother Dylan's traffic fines when he forgot, buying groceries so the fridge didn't look empty when company came over. Helping, I called it. But now, sitting at my kitchen table surrounded by receipts and bank statements, I see it for what it was. Not help, control. A leash I didn't even know I was wearing. Every number told a story, mortgage payments that weren't mine, gas bills with my name in the fine print, my mother's handwriting on envelopes I'd signed without reading. I used to laugh about it. "It's just family," I'd say, handing over my card while she smiled that practiced smile. I thought it was love. I thought I was being good. But love doesn't make you invisible. It doesn't make you responsible for other people's laziness. Mom used to say, "You're the responsible one, Maisie. God gave you a good head for numbers." And I'd nod, feeling proud that she saw something in me. Now I hear what she really meant. "You'll clean up after us, won't you?" At work that week, I must have stared at the monitor for an hour before I realized the spreadsheet wasn't moving. My coworker Nora stopped by my desk. "You okay, Maisie? You look miles away." I forced a small smile. "Just thinking about family budgets. They're never balanced." She laughed, not knowing how true that was. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Hey, you still got that family property in your name? Because I saw something weird pop up during an audit request. Your mom's name was on a local tax notice. Same last name, same street." My throat tightened. "What kind of notice?" She shrugged. "Routine stuff, maybe late fees. Thought you'd want to know." I went home early. My stomach was tight the whole drive. The snow had melted, leaving behind dirty puddles that reflected the weak winter light. It felt like everything around me was gray. My mood, my thoughts, my trust. I spread the bills out on the kitchen counter like evidence. There it was, Lorraine Mitchell. And below it, in looping, too perfect handwriting, my own name. Same ink color, same slant, but not my hand, not this time. I remembered the day she told me, "You're the only one I can rely on, honey. Your brother's hopeless, and I'm not getting any younger." That was the trap. She made dependence sound like love. I nodded, every time, thinking I was the good daughter. Thinking responsibility made me worthy of affection. But standing there with that bill in my hand, I realized she never wanted my help. She wanted my compliance. And she'd built an entire life out of my silence. I called the electric company, just to confirm. The voice on the other end said politely, "Yes, Ms. Mitchell, both accounts are linked under your credit file. Automatic payments were active until last month." I asked when the second account had been added. "September 12th, she replied. I felt my stomach twist. That was the week Mom told me she accidentally misplaced her wallet. I hung up and just stared at the wall. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I could hear the refrigerator hum, the faint ticking of the clock. I thought about all the times I'd paid to keep her lights on. Every time she said thank you, it had been for keeping her lies alive. I made myself a cup of coffee, but it tasted bitter. Everything did. For the first time, I opened a drawer and pulled out every old receipt I'd saved over the years. Taxes, utilities, insurance, repairs. I never realized how much paper one woman could bury herself under. Each page was a small confession, proof of my own blindness. I started sorting. Yellow folder for Lorraine, blue for Dylan, green for shared. By midnight, I had stacked so high they looked like walls. Walls built from years of quiet servitude. It wasn't anger yet, just understanding. The kind that makes you sick before it makes you strong. When my phone buzzed, I jumped. A message from Nora. "Hey, check your mail tomorrow. That audit notice might get reissued under your name. Just giving you a heads up." I typed back, "Thanks, I'll handle it." And I will. But I also knew handling it meant something new now. It meant waking up from the story they'd written for me. I picked up the last bill from the table, one I hadn't seen before. The envelope was thin, almost new. I opened it slowly. My breath caught. It was another utility form, this time with a clean signature line. My name again, neat and deliberate. But the date was last week, and the signature wasn't mine. I sat across from my mother at her kitchen table, the same one I'd sanded and refinished for her last year. The smell of cheap coffee drifted up from her mug. She didn't even look at me when I said, "You signed my name again, didn't you?" Her eyes flicked up, lazy and unbothered. "Oh, for God's sake, Maisie, it was just a favor. You're always overreacting." I studied her face. The tiny twitch near her mouth told me she knew exactly what she'd done. "A favor? Forging my name on a bill isn't a favor, Mom." She gave a half laugh and stirred her coffee, clinking the spoon against the rim. "You act like I stole something. I was trying to keep the lights on. You've always helped me. Don't get self-righteous now." There it was again, that tone she used to shrink me down to a child. "You could have called me," I said quietly. She looked straight at me. "And hear you sigh through the phone? No thanks. I carried you for 9 months, Maisie. You owe me at least a signature." Something inside me went still, not angry, just clear. "I don't owe you fraud," I said. Her smirk faltered for half a second. Then she waved her hand like she was brushing away dust. "You've always been dramatic. No one's going to care about a little scribble." I stared at her mug. The glaze was chipped along the edge, just like the lie we were living in. "You knew it wasn't little when you did it," I said. She sighed, tired and dismissive. "You're making a big deal out of nothing. You've always been so ungrateful. All I ever did was raise you right." I felt that old guilt stir, the one that told me she was right. But it didn't hold like it used to. It just flickered and faded. Raising someone doesn't give you permission to keep using them. Her lips pressed together. "You've changed," she said finally. I had to. I stood up, slipped my coat back on, and left the cup of untouched coffee on the table. The house smelled like every memory I wished I could wash out of my skin. Bleach, old bread, and bitterness. Outside, the cold hit my lungs and cleared my head. The drive to the bank was silent except for the tires crunching over salt. I walked in, calm but shaking, inside. When I reached the counter, a woman in a navy blazer smiled. "How can I help you today?" "I need to check a signature on one of my accounts," I said. "I think there's been an issue." She asked for my ID and led me to a small office. The fluorescent light buzzed faintly above us. I laid out the bill Mom had signed. "That's not my writing," I told her. She looked from me to the paper, her brow furrowing. "You're right. The signature doesn't match your file." She tapped a few keys, her tone softening. "You said this was for a utility line?" "Yes, added last week." She nodded slowly and opened a folder. "Ms. Mitchell, this isn't the first time a discrepancy like this has come up under your name." My chest tightened. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, then turned the folder around. Inside were copies of old forms, bank transfers, authorization slips, credit applications. All signed, all dated years apart, all written in a hand that looked almost like mine, but cleaner, neater, practiced. I couldn't speak for a moment. My pulse thudded in my ears. She lowered her voice. "Do you want to open a fraud report?" I stared at the page on top. It was from 3 years ago. Around the same time Mom said her arthritis was too bad to write checks anymore. "Not yet," I said quietly. "I just needed to see it." She nodded, sliding the folder closer to me. "Take your time, but I'd recommend documenting everything." I walked out of that office with the folder pressed against my chest like it was evidence of something sacred and cruel all at once. Outside, the air was biting cold, but it felt cleaner than anything I'd breathed in years. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty. I felt awake. I spent most of that night on the floor of my living room with stacks of paper spread around me like fallen leaves. Credit card statements, loan documents, old check stubs, all the little pieces of my life I'd filed away without ever really looking. It was supposed to be simple. Just find proof of the forgery, close the accounts, and move on. But it never is it? You think you're pulling one thread, and then realize the whole thing's a web. I started matching dates, every withdrawal I'd made, every payment that didn't look right. That's when I saw it. A cross payment between my card and hers, then another, then 6 more. My stomach tightened. They weren't mistakes. They were patterns. She'd been moving money like clockwork, small enough not to trigger alarms, consistent enough to stay invisible. I remembered her voice from years back saying, "Don't worry, honey, I'll pay you back when things get better." Things never got better, but she sure did get creative. For every bill she said she couldn't pay, there was one I somehow already had. I leaned back against the couch and stared at the ceiling. No tears this time, just a kind of dull ache that made everything quiet inside me. People think betrayal comes in big moments, slammed doors, loud fights, but it's the small ones that cut the deepest. The slow bleed of trust, the daily taking, dressed up as love. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. A text from my friend Claire, the lawyer I went to college with. I sent her a photo of one of the cross payments and wrote, "Hypothetically, what would you call this?" She called me back almost immediately. "Hypothetically, I'd call it financial fraud, Maisie." I laughed softly. "It's my mother." "Doesn't change the law," she said gently. "If she used your name or account without consent, it's a crime. You could file a report." I didn't answer right away. The thought of dragging my own mother into a courtroom made my stomach twist. "I'm not ready for that," I said. "I just need to understand how long it's been happening." Claire sighed. "Then document everything. Keep copies. If she did it once, she's done it before." After we hung up, I went back to sorting. The more I looked, the clearer it became that this wasn't about money. It was about control. Every dollar I gave her made her feel powerful again. Maybe she thought she was entitled. Maybe she thought I'd never look close enough to notice. And she was right. For years, I didn't. I picked up one of her old notes, one she'd left on my counter after borrowing my card. "You're a blessing, Maisie. I don't know what I'd do without you." I ran my thumb over the ink and realized it wasn't a thank you. It was a warning. She didn't know what she'd do without me, so she made sure she never had to find out. Midnight came and went. My eyes burned. My hands smelled like paper and dust. But I couldn't stop. I was looking for something specific. Not proof she'd used me, but proof I wasn't crazy. Proof that I hadn't imagined the subtle guilt trips, the "I'm your mother, you owe me" speeches, the way she'd smile when I caved. By 2 a.m., I had 3 folders labeled neatly with sticky notes. Her expenses, my payments, shared accounts. The shared pile was the thickest. Every piece of it screamed one thing. I'd been funding a relationship that didn't exist. I sat there a long time, staring at that pile, wondering why love so often comes with a receipt. My phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Claire. It was Dylan. I hesitated before pressing play on the voicemail. His voice was sharp, irritated, like always. "Mom's cutting you out of the will if you don't fix the bills. She says you've been acting cold lately. Thought you should know." I set the phone down slowly. My reflection stared back at me from the dark window. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel fear or guilt. Just quiet. Cold, clean quiet. "You think you're better than us because you work with numbers?" Her voice cut through the chatter like a blade. Forks froze. Conversations died mid-sentence. I looked up slowly, catching my mother's stare from across the table. She had that same half-smile she always used when she wanted everyone to watch her tear me down. The cousins glanced between us, waiting for a show. Lorraine leaned back, glass of wine in hand, and added, "You always act like you're above family, Maisie. But you're just lonely. No husband, no kids, nothing to brag about but your paycheck." I felt every word land like small stones. I could have answered. I could have told her how many times I'd bailed her out, paid for those same holiday meals she used to humiliate me at. But silence has more weight sometimes. So I smiled, barely, and said, "You're right, Mom. I don't have much." She smirked, mistaking quiet for defeat. "Exactly. Some people never learn gratitude." My brother chuckled from the end of the table. "She probably writes her feelings into spreadsheets," he said, loud enough for everyone to laugh. I looked at him, not angry, just tired. Better that than signing other people's names on them, I said. The laughter stopped. He dropped his fork. Lorraine's eyes narrowed. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing, I said softly, folding my napkin. Just, numbers always tell the truth, even when people don't. The silence that followed was sharp enough to draw blood. I stood up, tucked my chair in, and said, dinner was nice. No one stopped me. Not one person said goodbye. The cold air outside felt cleaner than the air at that table ever did. By the time I reached my car, my hands were shaking. Not from anger, but from release. Decades of small humiliations and quiet debts, all of it boiling just beneath my calm. I drove home without turning on the radio. I didn't need noise. I needed to hear myself think. When I got inside, the house felt too bright. I turned off every light except the one above the desk. My laptop screen glowed in the dark, waiting. The first thing I opened was my bank portal. Automatic payments. I'd set them up years ago. The property tax, the insurance, the phone bill, her utilities. Every time she said, I'll pay you back next month, I'd say, don't worry about it. Tonight, I worried about it. I hovered my cursor over the first one. Lorraine Mitchell, 186 is due monthly. I clicked cancel. Then the next, Dylan's car insurance. Cancel. One by one, every transfer, every direct debit, every automatic forgiveness. Gone. I watched the list shrink until the only payments left were mine. My rent, my life, my peace. When I finished, I sat back and stared at the blank screen. For the first time, it felt like my name actually belonged to me. You know, it's strange. For years, I thought kindness was something that made people love you. But tonight, I realized kindness was just currency, and I'd been spending it like it would buy me a family. Have you ever realized too late that kindness was just currency? I whispered it out loud, like maybe someone would answer. No one did. Just the quiet hum of the refrigerator, steady and indifferent. I poured myself a glass of water and leaned against the counter. I didn't feel guilty. Not yet. Just empty. Like the part of me that used to believe in their gratitude had finally died. Maybe that's what freedom feels like at first. Grief mixed with quiet relief. It was close to midnight when my phone started vibrating. One call, then another, then another. Lorraine's name flashing over and over again. I let it ring. Then the notifications began, text after text, her name filling the screen like static. I didn't read any of them. I knew the tone without opening a single one. Finally, I pressed the voicemail icon. Her voice came through, high-pitched, furious. The power's out, you monster. I let the message play twice, just to feel the weight of those words. Then I deleted it and whispered to the empty room, maybe now you'll learn to pay your own bills. I didn't answer her message. Not the first one, not the next 10. The phone kept lighting up on the counter, each notification a small echo of the life I'd finally turned off. I let it buzz until the battery died. The silence that followed was thick, almost holy. By morning, the calls had stopped. The world didn't end. The sky didn't fall. Only the noise quieted. Still, guilt sat in me like a guest who refused to leave. I told myself she'd figure it out. She always did. But part of me knew this time was different. I made tea and sat by the window, watching the snow melt into dirty puddles on the street. The apartment was calm. No one asking for money. No one calling for help. Just quiet. And yet, peace felt strange. Almost wrong, like wearing clothes that didn't fit yet. I kept waiting for a reason to take them off. Around noon, a text from my cousin popped up. Your mom's power's out. She's losing her mind. Another followed an hour later. Her fridge went bad. She's blaming you. I stared at the words and felt a small, sharp sting in my chest. Not regret, just recognition. That's how it always worked. When she was careless, I was cruel. When she failed, I was ungrateful. I brewed another cup of tea and turned the kettle off before it whistled. The quiet mattered more than the warmth. I thought about all the years I mistook exhaustion for love. I remembered how she used to sigh when I walked into a room, like my presence itself was work. You always make everything about you, Maisie, she'd say whenever I tried to help. But when I stopped helping, she called me selfish. There was never a way to win, only ways to serve. Later that evening, the phone lit up again. This time, a voicemail from a number I didn't recognize. I pressed play. Her voice came through, smaller, strained. "You've really done it now. The cable's gone, the fridge is ruined, and I hope you're happy. Your brother's trying to help, but he doesn't have what you do. You were supposed to be the good one." I replayed it once, then I deleted it. The kettle hissed softly on the stove, and for a second, I imagined my father standing there beside me like he used to. He was the only one who ever saw me as more than an obligation. I could still hear his voice from years ago, when I was barely 16 and crying in the garage because Mom had told me I'd never make it without her. He'd wipe my face with a rough hand and said, "One day, kindness will stop feeling like slavery." Back then, I didn't understand. I do now. That memory warmed me more than the tea. It made me realize peace doesn't feel right at first because it's not something you inherit. It's something you take back. And taking it back means losing the people who never wanted you to have it in the first place. By Friday, the news reached me through a neighbor who still talked to my mother. Her car got repossessed, she said casually. She was screaming in the driveway. I nodded, pretending to be surprised. I didn't enjoy hearing it, but I didn't mourn it either. That night, I left my phone in another room and let the apartment stay dark. I didn't need light to feel safe anymore. I needed space. I needed silence. I needed to remember what my life sounded like without her voice filling it. I thought about calling her. Not to apologize, but to tell her it didn't have to be this way. Then I realized she wouldn't hear me anyway. People who feed on control don't listen. They consume. The clock on the wall ticked slow and steady. I curled up on the couch, letting the sound of my own breathing fill the room. It wasn't joy exactly, but it was something close to peace. I don't know how long I sat there before the knock came. Hard, fast, angry. I froze. The knocking turned to pounding. "Maisie, open up!" Dylan's voice, sharp, breathless. I got up slowly and opened the door just enough to see his face. His cheeks were red, his jaw tight, eyes burning with something between anger and panic. "You ruined Mom's life!" he shouted. When I opened the door, I didn't even have to look up. His breathing gave him away first. Heavy, angry, the kind of sound people make when they've already decided they're right. I left the door halfway open and leaned against the frame. Dylan's face was red, his jaw tight. "You ruined Mom's life," he said. I didn't answer. I just looked at him. He hated that. Silence. It made him fill the air faster. "She's sitting there in the dark, Maisie. No lights, no car, no food. She's crying, begging me to fix it. And you—" He shook his head like he couldn't finish. "You did this to her." I kept my voice steady. "She did it to herself." His eyes narrowed. "You always think you're so damn righteous, don't you? With your little job and your perfect life." "Perfect?" I almost laughed. "You mean the one I paid for, the one you borrowed from?" He froze. Just 1 second. That was all it took for the anger to slip and something smaller to show underneath. "What are you talking about?" I opened the door a little wider. "You think Mom didn't tell me? The car insurance, the credit line, the phone bill, every single one tied to my account. You've been living off the same kindness you're accusing me of taking away." He stepped back slightly. "No, that's not true." "It is," I said quietly. "I've got the paperwork. You and her both signed my name like it didn't belong to a real person." He blinked fast, looking everywhere but at me. His lips moved like he was trying to find the right defense. "She said you didn't care about family anymore," he whispered. I nodded slowly. "That's because she can't tell the difference between love and obedience." He laughed under his breath, sharp and bitter. "You sound just like Dad." That name stopped me for a second. He warned us both, remember? Said one day the truth would outlive the lies. Guess he was right. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The hallway light flickered above us, humming like a weak heart. Dylan's anger was fading into something raw. His hands trembled a little. "You don't know what she's been through," he said finally. I know exactly what she's been through, I replied, because I paid for all of it. He swallowed hard. I could almost see the gears turning behind his eyes, the slow realization that the money he'd taken wasn't hers to give, that every late night favor, and it's just one time, had a name behind it. Mine. I didn't say anything else. There was nothing left to explain. Watching him stand there was like watching a truth unravel. Slow, quiet, irreversible. He rubbed the back of his neck and muttered, "You could have just helped her again." "I already did," I said. By stopping. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. The anger had drained out of him completely now, leaving only confusion, maybe shame. "So what now?" he asked. "Now?" I took a breath. "Now she learns what it costs to build your comfort on someone else's exhaustion." He shook his head and backed away down the hall, muttering something about loyalty, about family. I closed the door before he could finish. The lock clicked softly. For a while, I just stood there, letting the silence settle back in. My hands were steady. My heart wasn't racing. It felt almost scientific, like performing an autopsy on something that used to be alive. Love, duty, guilt, all cut open and laid bare. I walked to the table, sat down, and stared at the cold mug of tea I'd left untouched. The taste in my mouth was strange. Not bitterness, not sweetness. Something in between. I turned my phone over out of habit. Notifications glowed across the screen. A photo, tag, a post from the local community page. Lorraine's house, a bright orange foreclosure notice pinned to the door. The caption read, "Ungrateful daughter ruins her mother's home." My thumb hovered over the image. Then I put the phone face down and whispered, "Let them talk." It started with a tag, my name under a photo I didn't post. Lorraine's house, foreclosure notice front and center, and the caption, "Ungrateful daughter ruins her mother's home." Within hours, it spread like wildfire. Comments, messages, whispers from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Everyone had an opinion, and none of them involved asking me what really happened. By afternoon, my phone felt heavier than usual. Every ping, every vibration felt like a small accusation. "Can't believe you'd do that to your own mother." "I always knew something was off about you. She gave you everything." The truth was, she gave me everything that made me small, and I spent my life paying for it. Clients started canceling meetings. One woman said, "It's just bad optics to be tied up in family drama, you understand?" I understood. People like their accountants, quiet and likable, not human, not complicated. I smiled, told her I understood completely, and hung up. Then I sat there, staring at the spreadsheet on my screen, realizing numbers were the only thing left that didn't lie to me. When I stepped outside that evening, neighbors were walking their dogs slower than usual. Mrs. Carpenter from across the hall gave me a tight smile. "Tough week?" she asked, voice syrupy with fake concern. I nodded. "Something like that." She lingered, waiting for me to defend myself. I didn't. I closed my door and let her have her story. Inside, I brewed tea and listened to the kettle hiss. The noise outside grew louder, cars, chatter, laughter. But in here, everything was still. I sat at the table and thought about silence, how it used to mean defeat, and now it meant freedom. They wanted me silent. I gave them silence. Turns out it's louder than forgiveness. That night, I scrolled through the endless comments again. Family members who hadn't visited in years were writing paragraphs about how selfish I'd become. Distant cousins posted photos of Lorraine holding me as a baby with captions like, "A mother's love never fades, even when her child does." I almost laughed. They weren't defending her out of loyalty. They were performing goodness, the same way she always did. A few messages stood out. "Heard there's more to the story. If you ever want to talk, people are starting to ask questions." One came from a journalist I vaguely remembered from high school, Emily Burns. Her message was simple. "Maisie, I'm working on a piece about small-town financial disputes. There's talk of forged accounts. Would you like to give your side before others tell it for you? I stared at the screen for a long time. Part of me wanted to delete it, ignore it like I had everything else. But then another thought crept in. Maybe the silence had done enough. Maybe it was time to let the truth make the noise. I wrote back, "When can we meet?" She replied almost instantly, "Tomorrow, Coffee House on Main, 11 a.m., off the record at first." That night, I couldn't sleep. Not out of fear, but from a strange calm. It felt like watching a storm through glass, destruction outside, safety inside. I thought about Dad again, how he used to say, "The truth doesn't shout, it waits." I finally understood what he meant. Waiting isn't weakness, it's precision. When morning came, I dressed simply. No makeup, no jewelry, just a gray sweater and jeans. I didn't want to look like someone trying to prove innocence. I wanted to look like someone who'd stopped apologizing for being alive. At the coffee house, Emily was already seated. She smiled nervously, recorder on the table but unopened. "I know this must be hard," she said. I stirred my coffee slowly. "No, Emily." Hard was pretending it wasn't happening. She asked questions carefully, like she didn't want to break anything. "So, your mother, she used your name?" I nodded. "More than once. And you have proof?" "I do." When I reached into my bag and set the folder down between us, her eyes widened. Bank statements, receipts, credit applications. Each one a small betrayal dressed as paperwork. I'd spent nights collecting them, but holding them now felt different, lighter. Emily hesitated before touching the folder. "You're sure about this going public?" I met her eyes. If silence is all I've had, maybe it's time people heard what it sounds like when it breaks. She nodded slowly, pressing the record button. The soft click echoed louder than it should have. When I left the cafe, the sky was pale and cold. My hands shook, not from nerves, but from release. Somewhere across town, I knew she'd feel it, the moment her version of love stopped being the only one people believed. I got home, set my keys on the counter, and turned my phone face down. I didn't need to see the news. I just needed to breathe. But a few hours later, it lit up anyway. A message from Emily. 5 words that felt heavier than the folder I'd given her. "It's running tomorrow, front page." The article went live at 6:42 a.m. I know because the first message hit my phone 2 minutes later. "Is this your mom?" Followed by a link. I opened it without breathing. The headline sat there, bold and unflinching. "Local woman forged daughter's finances to fund gambling habit." Her name in the subtext. My name in the third paragraph. And just like that, everything she'd built on guilt and manipulation began to crumble. For a long time, I just stared at the screen. I thought I'd feel satisfaction, justice, something bright and triumphant, but all I felt was stillness. My coffee went cold beside me. The morning light crept across the floor like it didn't know whether to enter or not. I scrolled slowly. The quotes were clinical, factual, bank statements, signed forms, witnesses. Emily's words were careful, not cruel. Records show the daughter's identity was used across multiple credit accounts without consent. No adjectives, no venom, just truth. And maybe that's what hurt the most. How quiet truth could be when it finally spoke. The comment section filled faster than the article loaded. People who once pitied her now called her reckless. "Can't believe she did that to her own child." Addiction or not, that's unforgivable. I didn't type anything. I didn't defend her or myself. I'd spent years filling silence with explanations. I was done explaining. Around noon, my office door stayed closed. My boss peeked in once, asked if I was okay. I nodded. "Fine," I said. He hesitated, then left a cup of coffee on my desk. It was the kindest thing anyone had done for me in weeks. When I finally stepped outside, the air felt different, lighter, maybe cleaner. The town that had once whispered behind my back now whispered about her. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like gravity correcting itself. I walked past the bakery where she used to buy scratch-offs. The clerk, A woman who used to smile too wide at my mother, look down when she saw me. That used to sting. Now, it just made sense. People show their loyalty to whatever power they think will save them. For years, that power was her voice. Now, it was her silence. I stopped at the park where Dad used to take me after school. The benches were still chipped, the trees still bent. I sat down and let the cold metal press through my coat. I thought about the woman I used to call my mother. Not the one from the article, but the one from my childhood. The one who brushed my hair, even when she was angry. The one who said, "We're a team, you and me." Maybe she believed it once. Maybe we both did. I didn't want this ending. I never wanted humiliation. Only honesty. But maybe the two are twins, born from the same truth. As the wind picked up, I found myself whispering into the open air. Do you think truth is still revenge if it's quiet? I don't know who I was asking. The sky, my father, maybe myself. The rest of the day passed like a long exhale. Emails, a few calls, a few people pretending they'd always believed me. It didn't matter anymore. The weight had shifted. The world had simply aligned with what had always been true. That evening, I sat by the window, cup of tea cooling in my hands. The street outside glowed under a weak yellow light. My phone lay face down on the table. I didn't want to check it. I didn't want to know who was talking now. But when it rang, I knew that tone, that number, Lorraine. For a second, I thought about letting it go to voicemail. But something in me, not love, not pity, maybe curiosity, made me answer. Her voice cracked before the first word. Maisie? I froze. She was crying, not dramatic tears, not the kind she used to weaponize, but the kind that sound like breaking glass. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she said between sobs. I didn't think they'd find out. I didn't say anything. I just listened to the sound of her breathing, the kind of sound that fills a space you once called home. Please, she whispered. Please tell them it's not true. I closed my eyes, hearing every echo of her control, her guilt, her need to twist the story one last time. The silence stretched until it almost hurt. Then I said very softly, "It is true, Mom." Her breath caught, and the line went quiet. I stayed on for another few seconds, just long enough to hear her break. Then I ended the call and set the phone down beside my cup. Outside, the wind finally stopped. Her number flashed again that morning. I let it ring twice before answering. Maisie, she said, her voice already breaking. You've ruined us. The words came out between sobs, like she was performing pain for an audience I couldn't see. I stayed quiet. She filled the silence fast, the way she always did. I can't walk into the grocery store without people whispering, "You've embarrassed this family. Your father would—" I stopped her softly. "He'd tell you to stop lying." She gasped, as if I'd struck her. "Don't talk to me like that. I'm still your mother." "You stopped being one when you forged my name," I said. "You can cry all you want, Mom, but those tears don't change numbers." Her tone shifted, quick as flipping a light switch. "You think you're perfect, don't you? Sitting there in your apartment, acting like you never made mistakes." "I made plenty," I said, "starting with believing you." She started crying louder, the kind that doesn't sound like grief. It sounds like control. "I only did what I had to do. We were drowning. You think money grows on trees? You think you're better than the rest of us?" I looked at the half-empty mug of coffee on my table, steam fading. "I think I'm just tired." There was a pause. Then she snapped, "Tired? You're tired? You don't know what tired is. You've had everything because of me." Her words hit the wall like dull stones. I didn't even flinch. "Love without respect is theater, Mom," I said quietly. "And I'm done buying tickets." For a second, she didn't speak. I could hear her breathing, ragged, angry, desperate. "So that's it? You'll just abandon your own mother?" "I'm not abandoning anyone," I said. "I'm just leaving the stage." She inhaled sharply. "Maisie, if you hang up—" But I already had. I set the phone down and let the quiet return. It wasn't peace yet, but it was close enough to feel like air. The kettle clicked. Behind me, water still warm from earlier. I poured another cup, though I didn't drink it. My mind wandered somewhere softer, somewhere where love wasn't a transaction. By evening, the sky had turned gray, the kind that hides the horizon. I tried to focus on work, on numbers, on something clean and predictable. But guilt is a patient guest. It sits quietly until you make eye contact. I thought of her crying, the house empty, the whispers. It should have hurt more than it did. Maybe that was the real proof that I'd finally outgrown her control. Around midnight, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I ignored it. Then it buzzed again and again. I answered on the fourth ring, my voice barely above a whisper. "Hello? Is this Maisie Mitchell?" A man asked. His tone was firm, official. "This is Detective Howard with the county police. Your brother, Dylan Mitchell, has been taken into custody." My stomach tightened. For what? "Credit fraud, multiple counts. Some of the documentation lists your name." I closed my eyes. My name? "Yes, ma'am. There's a file. I'd advise you come down tomorrow to confirm your statement." I hung up and stared at the dark window. The city lights outside blurred against the glass. My reflection stared back, tired eyes, no surprise left. I walked to the kitchen, opened the drawer where I kept my documents, and pulled out the folder I'd built like armor over the past weeks. I didn't want to open it. I already knew what I'd find. Still, I spread the pages across the table. Bank forms, payment authorizations, forged initials that had once belonged to my mother. But near the bottom, under a new date and different handwriting, one signature looked painfully familiar. Mine, or what he thought was mine. Dylan. My throat went dry. I ran my finger along the ink, still faintly smudged from whatever printer had spat it out. The same looped M, the same careful slant. Except this time, I hadn't signed it. I sat back in the chair, hands flat on the table. For a while, I didn't move. I just listened to the soft hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the wall clock, the sound of everything still functioning in a world that suddenly didn't make sense. It wasn't just her anymore. It never had been. It was all of them. The shared greed, the practiced guilt, the way they turned my care into currency. I folded the papers slowly, one by one, until only that last forged signature was left staring up at me. Then I whispered to no one. "So it runs in the family." The courtroom was colder than I expected. Not in temperature, but in presence. The kind of cold that sits between people who once shared a home. When they called my name, I stood, smoothing my jacket even though my hands weren't shaking. I'd spent too long letting her make me feel small, not today. I walked to the witness stand and swore in. The microphone buzzed slightly, then settled. My voice sounded strange at first, too calm for the weight of the moment. "My name is Maisie Mitchell," I said. "I'm 38 years old, and I work as a financial analyst." The words came out steady, measured, facts, not emotion. The attorney began his question slowly. "Ms. Mitchell, when did you first become aware that your name had been used without your consent?" 3 months ago, I answered, when a journalist contacted me about forged documents connected to my mother. There was a low murmur behind me. I didn't have to turn around to know where it came from. Lorraine sat in the gallery, arms crossed, wearing the same expression she used when I disappointed her as a child. The attorney continued. "Did you confront her?" "Yes," I said. She denied it. Then she cried. I paused, then added softly, "That part was familiar." He nodded, moving closer. "Can you confirm these are the documents you provided to law enforcement?" I looked at the folder. My signature, her handwriting, all tangled in ink that had cost me years of peace. "Yes, that's them." Across the room, I could feel her eyes burning into the side of my face. I didn't look. Not once. I focused on the judge, on the ceiling, on the calm breath leaving my body. I thought of the girl I used to be, the one who apologized for everything, even when it wasn't her fault. She wouldn't recognize this version of me. When the defense attorney stood, his tone was sharper. Ms. Mitchell, isn't it true your mother supported you financially when your father passed away? She did, I said, and she reminded me every day. He smiled slightly. So this is repayment then? Retribution? No, I said quietly. This is correction. There was a pause long enough to feel like a choice. I let it hang there, heavy but clean. The questions went on for nearly an hour, each one pulling at old wounds. I answered them all, not with bitterness, not with fire, just truth. I realized somewhere along the way that I didn't need her apology. I needed distance. When it was over, I stepped down from the stand. Lorraine caught my eye then, mouthing something I didn't bother to read at first. But curiosity won. Ungrateful. The word landed like a pebble, not a stone. Small, harmless, familiar. I almost smiled. The judge's voice broke through the silence. This court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Ms. Maisie Mitchell. Full restitution to be paid in her name. The room seemed to tilt slightly, not from surprise, but from release. My knees felt weak, though not from victory, from the weight leaving all at once. I glanced at her one last time. She looked smaller somehow, folded in on herself, mascara streaked. For years, I'd thought her power came from strength, but sitting there, I saw it clearly. It had always come from my permission. As I walked out of that courtroom, the light outside felt too bright. I blinked into it, breathing in air that didn't belong to her anymore. For the first time in years, I wasn't defending myself. I was simply free. The courthouse silence stayed with me for days. Even when I was home, even when the city moved around me, it was like the air refused to carry sound. My phone sat face down on the table, lighting up every few minutes with messages I didn't open. I didn't need to. I already knew who they were from. Lorraine had never handled losing quietly. By the third day, there were 87 missed calls, texts from numbers I half recognized. You've gone too far. She's still your mother. How could you? I scrolled through them once, then deleted them all. Some wounds aren't worth rereading. The foreclosure notice came a week later. I didn't search for it. Someone tagged me in a local Facebook post. Ungrateful daughter ruins her mother's home. The comments poured in like stormwater, half gossip, half pity. I didn't reply. I'd learned the power of silence. It does what shouting never could. The house that used to be her fortress was stripped bare. Her reputation, her friends, her comfort, all gone. For years, she built her image on sacrifice, on being the woman who gave and gave. Now the same people who believed her were sharing the article that broke her mask. My coworkers stopped asking questions. They'd seen the trial updates. My manager left a note on my desk that just said, "Take your time." I smiled at that. Time had been the one thing I'd never allowed myself to have. I spent most of those days rearranging the little pieces of my life she'd once controlled. My accounts, my mail, my last name on a few old forms. It was like washing smoke out of a room that had burned too long. At night, I'd make tea and sit by the window. The city lights flickered faintly against the glass. For the first time in years, I didn't flinch when I saw my reflection. Peace had a strange way of settling. Not loud, not triumphant, just steady. People talk about revenge like it's a fire, something that consumes and leaves nothing behind. But for me, it came disguised as quiet. It didn't roar, it didn't scream. It just arrived one morning in the stillness of my apartment when I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I was free. I didn't check the voicemail until late Friday. It was her voice, cracked and smaller than I remembered. Maisie, I'm sorry. The line went quiet after that. Maybe she was waiting for me to respond. Maybe she thought I'd come running like I used to. I let the message play once more, just to be sure I heard it right. Then I pressed delete, not out of cruelty, out of closure. There are some apologies that come too late to belong anywhere. The evening light dimmed, sliding across the floor in long gold streaks. I looked around my apartment. The quiet hum of the refrigerator, the faint scent of tea, the old framed photo sitting on the bookshelf. It was from a lifetime ago. Me, Dad, and her. His hand rested on my shoulder, his smile soft but knowing. I picked it up and traced his face with my thumb. For years, I thought forgiveness meant going back. Now I knew better. Forgiveness was walking forward and not looking over your shoulder. I whispered into the quiet, "You were right, Dad." Then I set the frame down and finally let the silence feel like peace. The smell of roasted herbs filled my kitchen long before anyone arrived. I kept tasting the gravy, adjusting the salt, not because it needed it, but because the quiet felt strange without something to do. The table was already set. Mismatched plates, soft candles, and the good silver I'd never used back when dinners meant judgment instead of laughter. Tonight wasn't about family. It was about peace. When the doorbell rang, I wiped my hands on a towel and smiled before opening it. "Come in," I said. My friend stepped through the doorway, carrying dishes and laughter, the kind that doesn't measure your worth before offering warmth. I watched as they filled the room with chatter, stories, and the sound of belonging that didn't require bloodlines. Someone teased, "Maisie, you've gone full hostess mode." I laughed. "I had to make up for a few years of bad dinners," I said. They didn't know the weight behind those words, but that was fine. Not every truth needed retelling. When everyone sat down, I took a moment before joining them. The candles flickered softly across their faces, lighting up a scene that felt borrowed from a life I used to think belonged to someone else. I remembered last Thanksgiving. The shouting, the accusation, the phone ringing off the hook. This time all I heard was forks against plates and the hum of soft music. Halfway through dessert, I slipped away to the living room to catch my breath. On the side table sat a single envelope with my name on it. Lorraine's handwriting. Still neat, still trying to look composed. I stared at it for a minute before picking it up. For a moment, I almost laughed at how my heart still reacted like a child waiting to be scolded. I opened it slowly. "Maisie," it began, "I hope you're well. I've lost much, but I think about you every day. Maybe I went too far. Maybe you did too. I don't know what to call what we had anymore, but I miss the version of us that wasn't broken." The ink smudged near the end, like she'd hesitated before writing the last line. "You'll always be my daughter." I folded the letter neatly. No anger left in my hands, just quiet understanding. Some stories don't need a reply. They end when you stop carrying them. When I returned to the table, my friends were pouring wine and telling stories about their worst childhood meals. I joined in, laughing harder than I had in years. It felt strange, letting joy fill spaces that once belonged to fear, but it didn't feel wrong. It felt earned. Later, as everyone left, they hugged me one by one. "This was perfect, Maisie," someone said. I smiled. "Yeah," I whispered. "It really was." After the last car pulled away, I stood by the window for a long time, watching the streetlights flicker through the bare trees. The apartment was warm, quiet, alive. The kind of quiet that doesn't feel empty anymore. I looked at the letter again, then slipped it into the drawer where I keep things that no longer hurt. Closure isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just knowing you can finally breathe without explaining why. If you've ever had to walk away to find peace, know you're not alone. If my story resonated, stay with me for more like it. I blew out the last candle and sat at the table once more, the air still carrying hints of cinnamon and rosemary. My reflection in the window looked calm, almost unfamiliar in its ease. This Thanksgiving, I finally learned how peace tastes: quiet, honest, and mine.